today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. The sound of rain whispered against the city streets, a steady rhythm that blurred neon lights into soft streaks of blue and gold. It was nearly midnight when Ethan Ward pushed open the glass door of a small neighborhood clinic tucked between a laundromat and a dim cafe. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. He pressed a hand to his side. A deep scratch burned beneath his shirt, a reminder of a chaotic night gone wrong. He had slipped away from a high-profile corporate gala only an hour ago, escaping the cameras, the questions, the endless handshakes. His company was under the microscope after a scandal he did not cause, but was forced to manage. One photograph of him at the wrong place could ignite another round of headlines. So he had come here quietly, alone, with no chauffeur, no security, just a man bleeding beneath a soaked white shirt. "Please take a seat," a gentle voice said. He looked up. A young woman in a white coat stood under the fluorescent light. Her hair was tied neatly, her eyes calm but curious. "You are hurt. Let me help you." He hesitated, studying her. The badge on her coat read Maya Collins, MD resident physician. Her tone carried both authority and warmth. She did not recognize him, and for the first time in months, that felt like relief. As she cleaned the wound, the room fell into quiet rhythm, the rustle of gauze, the tick of the wall clock, the soft hum of the rain outside. Ethan watched her, hands move, steady and kind. "Rough night?" she asked. "You could say that?" He replied with a faint smile. "Corporate event?" she guessed, noticing the expensive cufflinks he had are gotten to remove. He chuckled softly, something like that. She did not push further. Instead, she told him about the clinic, how she worked double shifts to keep it open, how she dreamed of starting a community program for families who could not afford private hospitals. Her voice carried a quiet conviction that made him forget the pain. When she finally bandaged his side, she said, "You should rest. I can call someone to pick you up." He shook his head. "No need, I will manage." He stood, pulling a few bills from his pocket. The rain outside had eased to a mist. "Thank you, doctor." As he turned to leave, she noticed he had left a small piece of paper on the counter. In careful handwriting, it said, "Thank you for trusting a stranger." By the time she stepped out to return it, he was gone. The street was empty, except for the echo of rain and the faint red glow of a departing taxi. Maya looked down at the note, her fingers trembling slightly, unaware that the stranger she had just helped was one of the most powerful men in the city, and that this mistake of a meeting would change both their lives forever. 3 months had passed since that rainy night, but Maya still remembered the stranger who had walked into her small clinic. She kept the folded note tucked in her wallet, though she never said why. Some nights, when the waiting room was quiet and the hum of the fluorescent lights filled the air, she would take it out and read it again. "Thank you for trusting a stranger." The handwriting was steady, almost elegant. Whoever he was, he had disappeared without a trace, like a passing storm that left only silence behind. Life moved on, or at least it tried to. Ma's days blurred together, between patient charts, emergency calls, and endless cups of bad coffee. Rent was late again, and the clinic owner had hinted she might lose her position when the hospital merger finalized. Still, she stayed because she loved what she did. Healing people, even for a few minutes. Remy told her why she had become a doctor. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Ethan Ward's life was anything but quiet. His company's merger with a foreign investor had drawn unwanted attention. Reporters business partners doubted him, and every move he made appeared on financial news. The cut on his side had long healed, but the memory of that night, the young doctor with calm eyes and honest words, refused to fade. She had looked at him as a person, not as a name. That simple act had left a mark deeper than the wound. One evening, after another 12-hour board meeting, Ethan leaned back in his chair and pressed a hand to his chest. The pain was sharp, like a knife twisting behind his ribs. His assistant rushed to call an ambulance, but he stopped her. No hospitals, he said through shallow breaths. Find a small clinic somewhere quiet. No media. Within 30 minutes, his car pulled up in front of a modest brick building with a faded sign that read, Haven Community Clinic. Inside, Maya was finishing paperwork when the door swung open. A man stepped in, pale but composed, his shirt slightly unbuttoned as if he could not breathe. Please, he said, I need to see a doctor. You are seeing one, she replied, standing quickly. Come in, sit down. She placed a stethoscope against his chest. His heartbeat was irregular fast. You might be having an episode of tachycardia, she said calmly. You need to relax. Their eyes met for the first time, and something flickered between recognition and disbelief. He knew that voice, that face, the steady confidence that had once pulled him out of a storm. She looked closer, narrowing her eyes. The expensive watch, the familiar line of his jaw. Something felt hauntingly familiar. Have we met before? She asked quietly. Ethan froze, caught between truth and fear. I am not sure, he said, but your voice sounds safe. Maya gave a polite smile, brushing off the strange comment. Most people do not describe doctors that way, she sighed. Lightly, turning to prepare the monitor. Try to breathe normally. As she checked his vitals, Ethan studied her every movement, the same calm precision, the same soft tone. It was her, the woman from that night, the one he had left behind to protect her from the fallout of his scandal. His heart pounded not just from stress but from the weight of guilt. Your blood pressure is elevated, she said. You need to avoid stress for a while. Quote, that might be difficult, he murmured. Maya smiled, faintly. You would be surprised how much healing starts with slowing down. She wrote a prescription, sliding it toward him. Come back in a few days for a follow-up. He took the paper but did not move to leave. Dr. Collins, he said softly, reading her name badge. Thank you again. She looked puzzled. Again. Ethan hesitated, then stood, adjusting his cufflinks to buy time for being kind. Not everyone is. Quote, when he walked out, the doorbell chimed. Softly. Maya stood for a moment, watching. The empty doorway, her pulse strangely quick. There was something about that man. Something that tugged at a memory she could not quite place. She shook her head, trying to dismiss it, but as she turned off the lights, she caught her reflection in the clinic window. In her pocket, the folded note pressed against her palm like a heartbeat. Outside, Ethan leaned against his car, looking back through the glass. For the first time in months, he smiled. Fate had brought him back to the girl he thought he had lost, and this time he was not planning to disappear. The next few days slipped by quietly. Mia's clinic filled with the usual rhythm of coughs, prescriptions, and small talk, but somewhere in that steady routine, one name kept circling her mind. Ethan Ward. She had searched the clinic database out of pure curiosity. His file said very little, only that he had come in for heart palpitations and stress-related symptoms. No insurance company, no corporate title, just a handwritten address. That led to a luxury district in the city. Something about it did not fit. Every evening when she locked up the clinic, she would glance at the folded note inside her wallet. The handwriting looked so similar to his signature on the prescription slip that it made her chest tighten. But that was impossible, she told herself. The man from that night was an ordinary stranger, not someone who wore tailored suits and drove cars worth more than the clinic itself. Meanwhile, Ethan found himself inventing reasons to return. A blood pressure check, a follow-up test, a question about medication. Each visit was another excuse to see her again. Maya was always polite but distant, keeping her professional smile like a shield. To her, he was simply a patient. To him, she was the only person who had ever looked past his wealth and seen something human. One rainy afternoon, he came in earlier than usual, holding a bouquet of lies in one hand. For the staff, he said quickly when she looked surprised. I thought the waiting room could use some color. Maya blinked, taken off guard by the gesture. That is kind of you, but we usually do not accept gifts from patients. Then consider it a donation, he said with a gentle smile. No strings attached? She hesitated, then nodded. All right, they are beautiful. Thank you. He sat on the examination table while she prepared her notes. How have you been feeling? She asked. Better, he said, Mostly because this place feels different from everywhere else, quieter. Most people find that boring, she replied. I find it peaceful. He paused, then added softly, You remind me of someone I met a while ago. Maya looked up. Really? Another doctor? Not exactly. Someone who helped me when I did not deserve it. Her pen stopped mid-sentence. Something in his tone struck a chord, but she stayed, silent, pretending to focus on the monitor. Outside, thunder rumbled, echoing faintly through the walls. The storm made her think of that other night, the soaked strand. The wound, the quiet thank you note. She brushed off the memory, but her heartbeat betrayed her. Are you all right? Ethan asked, noticing the slight tremor in her hand. I am fine, she said quickly, just tired. He wanted to tell her the truth, then to admit that he was the same man she had saved that night, but he could already imagine her reaction. Shock, anger, betrayal. So he swallowed the words and offered a different truth. You should not work so hard, Dr. Collins. Even healers need rest. She smiled faintly. If I stop, people like you will have no one to nag them about medication. Ethan laughed quietly. Fair point. As she finished the examination, she noticed something unexpected. Your heart rate has improved, she said. Whatever you are doing, keep it up. He looked at her for a long moment. Maybe I finally found a reason to slow down. Her cheeks warmed, and she quickly turned away to log his results. When she looked back, he was watching her, not with the detached politeness of a businessman, but with the quiet gratitude of someone who had been seen, truly seen, for the first time. When he left, the lily stayed on the counter, their scent softening the sharp smell of antiseptic. The other nurses teased her gently, asking who the charming patient was, but she brushed them off. Still, when she cleaned the clinic that night, she could not bring herself to throw the flowers away. In his office across the city, Ethan stared at the city skyline, the reflection of the clinic still vivid in his mind. For years he had measured his worth in profit margins and mergers. Now, he found himself wondering what it would feel like to be someone she could trust. A man, not a headline. Neither of them knew it yet, but the thread between them had been tied tighter than before. Fate had given them a second chance, and soon, it would force the truth to the surface, no matter how hard he tried to keep it hidden. A week later, Maya arrived early, at the clinic. The sky was pale gray, the kind of quiet morning that smelled like rain before it fell. She unlocked the front door, turned on the lights, and found a note waiting on the reception desk. It was written on heavy paper, folded neatly beside another bouquet of lilies. Thank you for your care. I will be away on business for a while, but I will return for my next appointment. Ew. She stared at the initials, her pulse skipping. Ew. Something about those two letters pulled at the edges of her memory, but she brushed it off and began her day. Patients came and went, charts filled, and the rhythm of her world continued as always. Steady, predictable, safe. But, across the city, Ethan Ward was not living anything close to safe. The merger he had fought for was collapsing, under media scrutiny. A rumor had surfaced online, one connecting him to a mysterious female doctor who had treated him in secret months earlier. The story twisted reality, turning an act of kindness into gossip about an affair and corruption, his law. Years told him to stay silent, to deny everything, to let it fade. Instead, he found himself staring at the same photo over and over again. An image leaked from a security camera near the clinic. It showed him stepping out into the rain, his back turned, and behind him, Maya holding the door. Her face was blurry, but he recognized her immediately. She had nothing to do with his business or his company's chaos, yet she was about to be dragged into it. For the first time in years, Ethan ignored his advisors. He drove himself back to Haven Community Clinic late that evening. The rain had started again, soft and steady, echoing the night they first met. He parked on the empty street and sat there for a moment, his reflection trembling in the windshield. Inside, the lights were still on. Maya was finishing her last patient when she saw him standing by the doorway, rain clinging to his coat. Ethan, she said in surprise, you are back sooner than expected. I had to see you, he replied. His voice was quieter than usual, rough, around the edges. She motioned toward the chair. Is something wrong with your health? No, he said. But something is about to be wrong with yours. If I do not fix this, her brow furrowed. I do not understand. He took a deep breath. The night you found me, the night I left, without saying goodbye, I was hiding from the press. There was a corporate scandal. If they had known I was at your clinic, they would have ruined you. I thought I was protecting you by disappearing. Maya's pen slipped from her hand. You were that man? She whispered. The one from the rain? He nodded. I am sorry. I should have told you sooner. Her expression was unreadable. Why now? Because someone leaked the story. They know you treated me. The news will break tomorrow. The words sank into the sterile air between them. Outside, thunder rolled low and distant. Maya folded her arms, trying to keep her voice steady. So, you are saying my name might end up in headlines because of you? Yes, he said. But I will not let that happen. I will take full responsibility. I will tell them everything was my fault. She looked at him, her heart pounding. You think that fixes it? That you can just walk in and decide how this ends? Ethan's voice cracked. I am trying to make it right, Maya. But she turned away. You made your choices months ago. Quote, he wanted to reach for her to explain that he had spent every night regretting that decision, but her silence stopped him cold. After a long pause, she whispered, Please leave. I cannot do this right now. Ethan hesitated, then stepped back, toward the door. The rain outside had turned heavier, tapping against the glass like a heartbeat. I am sorry, he said one last time before disappearing into the storm once again. Maya stood, alone in the quiet clinic, her reflection mirrored in the window where the city lights flickered. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again as if the past was coming back whether she wanted it or not. The next morning, the headlines spread like wildfire. CEO Ethan Ward caught in secret relationship with local doctor. The words flashed across every screen, every news feed, every radio broadcast. Maya stood in the break room of the clinic holding her phone with trembling hands. Her picture taken from that grainy security image was everywhere. The article called her the mystery woman behind the scandal. Patients canceled their appointments, and her supervisor demanded an explanation. She did not have the energy to give. She locked herself in her office, staring at the rain streaking down the window. Just 3 months ago, she had been invisible, a tired doctor trying to make ends meet. Now the whole city thought she was someone else entirely, someone who traded compassion for ambition. When the door opened, she expected her manager. Instead, Ethan stood there unshaven and exhausted. Maya, he said quietly, you should not be here. Reporters are outside. She looked up at him, her voice trembling. What did you do? I told them the truth, he said. That you saved my life, that there was no affair, no secret. You were just doing your job. Quote, that does not erase what they printed, she replied. You have no idea how easily people believe the worst version of a woman's story. Ethan took a step closer. Then, let me fix it. She shook her head. You already tried to fix it once. You disappeared. You protected your image. I lost mine. He fell silent. The hum of rain filled the space between them. Then he reached into his coat and placed a folder on her desk. This is the new plan for the Ward Foundation, he said. A public health initiative, free community clinics under your direction. It is in your name, Maya. You deserve recognition, not rumors. She blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. Why are you doing this? Because I cannot undo what happened, but I can make sure your work survives it. He hesitated, his voice breaking. And because I owe you more than I can ever repay. Maya stared at the papers, at the logo embossed in gold, her name written underneath. You think this will make people forget? No, he said softly. But it will remind them who you really are. For the first time in days, she felt something shift inside her chest, an ache that was not anger, but something heavier, deeper. He looked different now, not like the polished CEO who had once vanished into the night, but like a man stripped of every layer except regret. She exhaled slowly. If I agree to this, it is for the people we can help, not for you. I would not want it any other way, he replied. Before she could answer, the sound of shouting echoed outside. Reporters had gathered near the entrance, their voices rising with questions and camera flashes. Ethan turned toward the noise, then back at her. "Stay here," he said. "Ethan, do not." But he was already out the door. Through the clinic window, Maya saw him step into the rain, facing the crowd head-on. Cameras flashed like lightning. "I have a statement," Ethan said firmly, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Dr. Maya Collins is not part of any scandal. She is a doctor who gave help when I needed it most. The shame is mine, not hers. If you want to write a story, write about her work, write about the people she saves every day." The reporters shouted over each other. But the clip spread instantly. Within hours, social media began to turn. Comments flooded in. "She deserves respect. He owned his mistake. Maybe there are still good people left." Inside the clinic, Mia watched the scene replay on a small television in the corner. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from something she had almost forgotten: relief. She looked down at the folder again at her name printed in clean letters and whispered to herself, maybe fate did not make a mistake after all. Outside, the rain began to ease. For the first time since that night, the city seemed quiet again. And somewhere beneath the fading clouds, a second chance was beginning to take shape. Days turned into weeks, and slowly the noise faded. The headlines shifted to newer scandals, and the storm that had nearly ended Mia's career began to quiet. Patients returned to the clinic cautiously at first, then in steady numbers. Some offered words of support, others left handwritten notes that said things like, "Thank you for staying, we still trust you." Each one reminded her that truth, when held long enough, eventually surfaces. The Ward Foundation launched its first community program 2 weeks later. The event was held in the same neighborhood where the small clinic stood. Banners fluttered in the mild spring wind, and volunteers lined up in blue t-shirts with the words, "Healing starts here." Maya arrived early, nervous but composed. She had not spoken to Ethan since the press conference. He had kept his promise to handle the media, then disappeared again, giving her space. Part of her was grateful. Another part missed the sound of his quiet voice. When she walked into the hall, cameras were set up. But this time the attention felt different. It was not scandal, it was purpose. The board of directors, city officials, and community members filled the room. As Maya took her place at the podium, she noticed Ethan at the back of the crowd. He was standing slightly apart, wearing a dark suit, his expression calm but unreadable. Their eyes met for the first time in weeks. She hesitated for half a heartbeat, then began her speech. "This clinic is not just a building," she said. "It is a promise that everyone, regardless of status, deserves care, respect, and hope." Her voice steadied as she continued. "There was a time when I thought kindness was my weakness. I have learned that it is the strongest thing I have." Quote, applause filled the room, warm and honest. Ethan did not move, but his chest tightened as he listened. The same woman who had once saved him from the storm was now saving hundreds. After the ceremony, Mia stepped outside. For air. The city skyline glowed gold against the late afternoon light. She turned when she heard footsteps behind her. "You did well," Ethan said softly. She smiled faintly. "I did what I had to do." "I know," he said. "You always do." Quote, they stood in silence for a moment, the hum of traffic fading into the background. Then she asked quietly, "So what happens now after all this?" He exhaled. "I am stepping down as CEO. The board wants a new face after the merger fallout." "I think it is time." Maya looked surprised. "Are you sure? You built that company." "I built it," he said, "but it cost me everything else. Maybe I was supposed to lose it so I could find what actually matters." His eyes met hers, steady and unguarded. "People like you, places like this." She felt her throat tighten. "Ethan," he smiled a little. "Do not worry, Dr. Collins. I am not here to complicate your life again." "I do not think you could if you tried," she said, half teasing, half trembling. He laughed softly. The genuine laugh in months. "That is the best news I have heard all day." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and flowers. For a long moment they just stood there, two people who had walked through the same storm, and somehow found their way back to calm. When he finally left, Maya watched him disappear into the crowd. She pressed a hand against her pocket where that old note still rested, now creased and faded. "Thank you for trusting a stranger." The words no longer felt like a goodbye. In the distance, thunder rolled again. Not a warning this time, but a reminder. Sometimes fate repeats itself. Not to break you, but to show you how far you have come. A few days later, the quiet balance Maya had started to rebuild began to tremble again. The Foundation's project was expanding fast, drawing new sponsors, and with that came people who did not like sharing the spotlight. Rumors resurfaced, whispers that Mia's clinic only existed because of favoritism, that she was still too close. SE to Ethan Ward. Some even claimed she had influenced his decision to resign. She tried to ignore it, focusing on patients and reports, but the weight of judgment was heavy. Every smile from a sea orcher felt guarded, every handshake cautious. By the end of the week, she could barely look at her own reflection without hearing the same question echo in her mind. Did people think she had earned any of this? Late one evening, she stayed behind to finish inventory. The clinic was quiet, the kind of silence that felt too big. A soft knock startled her. When she opened the door, Ethan stood there again, holding a file in one hand. He looked different, tired but calm, no longer surrounded by the aura of corporate power. "Maya," he said gently. "I heard what they are saying," she sighed. "Let them. The truth never seems loud enough." Anyway, he stepped inside. "Then let me help make it louder." He placed the file on her desk. Inside were documents, invoices, and full transparency reports about the Foundation's funding. Every cent accounted for public record. No one can twist this now. She glanced at the papers, then at him. "You did not have to do that." "I did," he said quietly, "because I am the reason your name keeps coming up. I am not walking away this time." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain started again outside, tapping against the glass, soft but relentless. "You cannot fight everyone, Ethan," she said. "Some people only see what they want to see. Gosh, lie. Then we will keep showing them something better," he replied. "Actions speak louder, right?" Her lips curved into a small, weary smile. "You have been listening to my lectures." Every word, he said, and for the first time she saw lightness in his expression, a man learning to start over. The tension between them softened. She gestured toward the coat rack. "You can stay until the rain stops." He nodded and sat in the chair opposite her. The sound of rain filled the space, steady and rhythmic, like the night they fur. "Steamet." She looked down at the note still pinned on her bulletin board. The ink had faded, but the words remained clear. "Thank you for trusting a stranger." Ethan followed her gaze. "You kept it," he said. "I did," she answered softly, "because that night reminded me that kindness still matters even when people do not." He leaned forward, his voice low. "Then maybe it is my turn to return that kindness." Quote. Their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. No grand confession, no dramatic promise, just the quiet understanding of two people who had already survived the worst. Outside, the rain began to fade into a mist. The lights of the clinic glowed softly against the wet pavement. For the first time, the silence between them felt safe, and though neither said it aloud, both knew what the other was thinking. That some stories are not about rescue or redemption at all, but about learning when to stay. The following month marked the official launch of the Open Hands Initiative, AMO, biomedical program created from Maya's original idea and funded by the Ward Foundation. The project sent small clinics on wheels to underserved neighborhoods, offering free checkups, vaccinations, and medicine to anyone who needed them. It was the dream she once shared in a late-night conversation with a stranger who had vanished into the rain. Now it was real, and that stranger was standing beside her again. Maya adjusted the microphone at the opening ceremony, sunlight spilling across the small crowd gathered outside the clinic. Children waved tiny paper flags. Volunteers in blue shirts arranged boxes of supplies, and reporters snapped photos, but this time the flashes were for something good. She began, "When I first imagined this program, I wanted to bring care to those who could not come to us, but I never imagined it would start with one act of kindness, one simple moment that reminded me why compassion still matters." Her voice caught slightly as she looked out at Ethan, who stood in the front row, listening with quiet pride. "Today," she continued, "this is no longer just my dream. It belongs to every person who chooses kindness over convenience, action over comfort." craft. Applause rippled through the crowd. Ethan stepped forward as the foundation's representative, presenting her with a plaque inscribed with her name. For extraordinary service to community health, it read. As she accepted it, he leaned closer and whispered, "You see, Dr. Collins, the world finally knows what I saw that night." Maya smiled, her eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. "And what was that?" "Someone brave enough to keep believing," he said. The day passed in a blur of laughter, photos, and new beginnings. Later, as the last van rolled out toward the first neighborhood stop, Mia found a quiet corner by the parking lot. Ethan joined her, hands in his pockets, his tie loosened after a long day. "You did it," he said simply. "We did it," she corrected. "You turned my idea int. Oh, something that can last." He shook his head. "No, you did that. I just learned how to follow for once." Quote. She laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "That might be your biggest miracle yet." For a moment, they stood side by side, watching the van disappear into the distance. The sky was painted gold and coral, the kind of light that feels like closure and promise at the same time. Ethan took a slow breath. "You know," he said, "I used to believe success meant control, but you taught me that it means trust." Maya looked at him, her tone gentle but firm. "Trust and courage. The world breaks both if you let it." He nodded. "Then maybe it is time I learn how to keep them." As they turned back toward the clinic, volunteers were packing up the last boxes. The plaque gleamed in Maya's hands. She looked down at it, then at him. "Ethan, thank you for keeping your promise." He smiled. "You kept mean first." The sound of laughter echoed from the parking lot as evening settled over the city. And in that quiet moment, without needing any grand gesture, they both understood that redemption had already happened. Not in words or headlines, but in the steady rhythm of giving, healing, and beginning again. A year later, the world around them looked different. The Open Hands initiative had grown into a network of clinics across the state, serving thousands of people who once had no access to care. Newspapers no longer mentioned the scandal. They wrote about a program that was changing lives. Every story began the same way, with a photo of Dr. Maya Collins standing beside a van marked "Free Care for All." That afternoon, the foundation hosted a small celebration for the first anniversary. Banners fluttered in the warm breeze, and a brass band played softly in the park beside the clinic. Maya moved through the crowd, greeting patients and volunteers, smiling as children handed her paper flowers they had made in the waiting room. Ethan arrived quietly, wearing a light gray suit. He looked at peace, no longer the restless executive from a year ago. When Mia saw him, she smiled. "You made it," she said. "I would not miss it," he replied. "It is your day." "It is ours," she corrected gently. "You were part of the beginning." Yet they walked together toward a small stage where a glass display case stood, covered by a white cloth. "Before we close today's event," Maya announced to the crowd, "there is something I would like to show you." She pulled the cloth away, revealing the framed note, the same one she had kept since that first night. The paper had yellowed slightly, but the words were still clear. "Thank you for trusting a stranger." Gasps rippled through the crowd as Maya continued. "This note started everything. A stranger came in from the rain, and I made a choice to help him. I did not know he was a CEO or that our paths would ever cross again. But that moment reminded me that kindness never disappears. It multiplies." Ethan stepped beside her, his voice Teddy. "She saved my life that night, and in every way that matters, she saved it again by showing me what real purpose looks like." Applause filled the air, genuine and warm. Maya turned to him, eyes shining. "You kept the promise you made to do something good with your second chance. And you," he said softly, "kept the promise you made to never stop believing in people." For a moment, the noise around them faded. The sunlight caught on the glass frame, reflecting across both their faces. Maya reached for his hand, not as a grand gesture, but as something simple, honest, and real. Together, they placed the framed note on the wall of the clinic's new lobby. Above it hung a small plaque engraved with one sentence: "The best mistake we ever made." As the crowd cheered, Ethan leaned closer and whispered, "So, Dr. Collins, do you still believe in fate?" She smiled. "I believe in choices, but sometimes fate just gives us the chance to make the right one." The music swelled, laughter carried through the air, and the scene faded on the two of them standing beneath the golden light. Llegó a una pequeña clínica en busca de atención médica. Jamás imaginó que la doctora sería la misma mujer que había perdido aquella noche. Pero hola a todos. Antes de empezar con la historia de hoy, les pido un pequeño favor. Suscríbanse al canal y activen la campanita para que no se pierdan ninguno de nuestros nuevos videos. Es rápido, gratis y nos ayuda muchísimo a seguir trayéndoles más relatos llenos de emoción. Su apoyo lo es todo para nosotros. Desde donde nos están viendo, déjenme su ciudad o país en los comentarios. Mil gracias. Ahora, volvamos con nuestro protagonista. Pero la lluvia caía suavemente sobre las calles de la ciudad, marcando un ritmo constante que difuminaba las luces de neón en trazos suaves de azul y dorado. Era casi medianoche cuando Alexander Reed abrió la puerta de cristal de una modesta clínica de barrio, situada entre una lavandería y un café apagado. El ambiente olía levemente a desinfectante y a café recién hecho. Se llevó una mano al costado, una herida profunda le ardía bajo la camisa, recuerdo de una noche que se había torcido por completo. Acababa de escapar de una gala corporativa importante, huyendo de flashes, preguntas y apretones de manos interminables. Su empresa estaba bajo escrutinio por un escándalo que no había provocado, pero que le tocaba resolver. Una sola foto suya en el lugar equivocado podía desatar otra ola de titulares. Por eso había llegado Ali en silencio, sin chofer ni escolta, solo un hombre herido bajo una camisa blanca empapada. «Pase y siéntese, por favor», dijo una voz amable. Pero levantó la vista. Una joven con bata blanca estaba bajo la luz fluorescente. Llevaba el cabello recogido con cuidado, los ojos serenos pero atentos. «Está herido. Permítame ayudarlo». Dudó un instante, observándola. En la placa de su bata se leía «Sofía Ramírez MD, médica residente». Su voz mezclaba firmeza y calidez. No lo reconoció y por primera vez en mucho tiempo, eso le trajo alivio. Mientras limpiaba la lesión, el consultorio se llenó de un ritmo tranquilo, el crujir de las gasas, el tic-tac del reloj en la pared, el murmullo suave de la lluvia afuera. Alexander observaba sus manos, precisas y gentiles. «¿Noche complicada?», preguntó ella. «Se podría decir», respondió él con una media sonrisa. «¿Evento de empresa?». Adivino, notando los gemelos caros que había olvidado quitarse. Pero soltó una risa baja. Algo por el estilo. Ella no insistió. En cambio, le habló de la clínica, de cómo hacía turnos dobles para mantenerla a flote, de su sueño de lanzar un programa comunitario para familias que no podían pagar hospitales privados. Había en su tono una convicción serena que le hizo olvidar el dolor por un momento. «Cuando termino de vendarlo», dijo «debería descansar. Puedo llamar a alguien para que lo recoja». Negó con la cabeza. «No hace falta. Me las arreglaré». Se puso de pie, sacó unos billetes del bolsillo. La lluvia afuera se había convertido en una llovizna fina. «Gracias, doctora». Pero al girarse para irse, ella vio que había dejado un papelito en el mostrador. Con letra cuidada decía: «Gracias por confiar en un desconocido». Cuando salió a devolvérselo, ya no estaba. La calle quedó vacía, solo el eco de la lluvia y el brillo rojo tenue de un taxi que se alejaba. Sofía miró la nota, con los dedos ligeramente temblorosos, sin saber que el desconocido al que acababa de atender era uno de los hombres más influyentes de la ciudad y que ese encuentro casual cambiaría sus vidas para siempre. Habían pasado 3 meses desde aquella noche lluviosa, pero Sofía aún recordaba al extraño que entró en su clínica. Guardaba la nota doblada en su cartera, aunque nunca explicó por qué. Algunas noches, cuando la sala de espera estaba en calma y solo se oía el zumbido de las luces, la sacaba y la releía. «Gracias por confiar en un desconocido». La caligrafía era firme, casi refinada. Quienquiera que fuese, se había desvanecido sin dejar rastro. Crow, como una tormenta que pasa y solo deja silencio. La vida seguía, o al menos lo intentaba. Los días de Sofía se mezclaban entre historias clínicas, llamadas de urgencia y tazas de café mediocre. El alquiler volvía a retrasarse, y el dueño de la clínica había insinuado que podría perder su puesto con la fusión hospitalaria que se avecinaba. Aún así, se quedaba porque amaba lo que hacía. Ayudar a sanar, aunque fuera por unos minutos, le recordaba por qué eligió ser médica. Mientras tanto, al otro lado de la ciudad, la vida de Alexander Reed estaba lejos de ser tranquila. La fusión de su empresa con un inversionista extranjero atraía miradas no deseadas. Los periodistas lo perseguían, los socios dudaban, y cada paso suyo aparecía en las noticias financieras. La herida del costado ya había cicatrizado, pero el recuerdo de aquella noche, la doctora de mirada tranquila y palabras sinceras, no se borraba. Ella lo había visto como persona, no como un nombre famoso. Ese gesto sencillo había dejado una huella más profunda que cualquier corte. Una tarde, tras otra reunión de directorio de 12 horas, Alexander se recostó en su silla y se llevó una mano al pecho. El dolor era agudo como una puñalada entre las costillas. Su asistente quiso llamar a una ambulancia, pero él la detuvo. Nada de hospitales, dijo entre respiraciones cortas. Busca una clínica pequeña, discreta. Sin prensa. Media hora después, su auto se detuvo frente a un edificio modesto de ladrillo con un letrero descolorido, Clínica Comunitaria Refugio. Adentro, Sofía terminaba unos papeles cuando la puerta se abrió. Entró un hombre pálido pero sereno, con la camisa entreabierta, como si le costara respirar. Por favor, dijo, necesito ver a un médico, ¿verdad? Ya está viendo a uno, respondió ella, poniéndose de pie rápido. Pase, siéntese. Le colocó el estetoscopio en el pecho. El latido era irregular y acelerado. Podría ser un episodio de taquicardia, explicó con calma. Relájese, pero sus miradas se cruzaron por primera vez, y algo brilló entre reconocimiento y sorpresa. Él reconoció esa voz, ese rostro, esa seguridad serena que lo había sacado de la tormenta. Ella lo observó más de cerca, el reloj caro, la línea familiar de la mandíbula. Algo le resultaba inquietantemente conocido. ¿Nos hemos visto antes?, preguntó en voz baja, pero Alexander se quedó quieto, atrapado entre la verdad y el temor. No estoy seguro, dijo, pero su voz me transmite calma. Pero Sofía sonrió cortésmente, dejando pasar el comentario extraño. La mayoría no describe así a los médicos. Bremeó ligeramente mientras preparaba el monitor. Respiré con normalidad. Mientras revisaba sus signos vitales, Alexander observaba cada gesto suyo, la misma precisión tranquila, el mismo tono suave. Era ella, la mujer de aquella noche, a quien había dejado atrás para protegerla de las consecuencias de su escándalo. Su corazón latía fuerte, no solo por el estrés, sino por la culpa acumulada. Su presión está alta, dijo ella. Debe evitar el estrés por un tiempo. Eso puede ser complicado, murmuró él, pero Sofía sonrió levemente. Se sorprendería de cuánto ayuda simplemente bajar el ritmo. Le extendió una receta. Vuelva en unos días para control. Tomó el papel, pero no se movió. Doctora Ramírez, dijo en voz baja, leyendo la placa. Gracias de nuevo. Ella lo miró confundida. Alexander dudó. Luego se levantó ajustándose los gemelos para ganar tiempo. No todos son tan amables. Cuando salió, la campanilla sonó suavemente. Sofía se quedó un momento mirando la puerta vacía, con el pulso acelerado sin razón aparente. Había algo en ese hombre que removía un recuerdo que no lograba ubicar. Sacudió la cabeza para despejarse, pero al apagar las luces, sintió la nota doblada en su bolsillo, presionando contra su palma como un latido. Afuera, Alexander se apoyó en su auto y miró hacia la clínica a través del vidrio. Por primera vez en meses, sonrió. El destino lo había devuelto a la mujer que creía haber perdido, y esta vez no pensaba desaparecer. Los días siguientes transcurrieron con calma. La clínica de Sofía seguía su rutina habitual: consultas, recetas, charlas breves. Pero en medio de esa normalidad, un nombre rondaba su cabeza: Alexander Reed. Por curiosidad, había revisado la base de datos de la clínica. Su expediente era escueto, palpitaciones y síntomas de estrés. Sin seguro corporativo, sin cargo ejecutivo, solo una dirección manuscrita en una zona de lujo. Algo no encajaba. Cada noche, al cerrar, miraba la nota en su cartera. La letra se parecía demasiado a la firma en la receta, le apretaba el pecho. Pero era imposible, se decía. El hombre de aquella noche era un desconocido común, no alguien con trajes a medida y autos que valían más que todo el local. Por su parte, Alexander inventaba pretextos para volver, un control de presión, una duda sobre la medicación, un chequeo más. Cada visita era una excusa para verla otra vez. Sofía mantenía